Agnes Savich is here, and we're going to talk to her about haiku and senryu and anything else she wants to talk about. Agnes has been published in just about every haiku journal that I can think of that has any weight at all. She's also, her work has been on Facebook and the internet and other places over the years. And I've met her a couple of times at meetings. And of course, we've all got to meet on Zoom meetings. So I wanted to introduce everybody to her and her work. And those of you that are in haiku know her or are familiar with her. Those of you who aren't, maybe you should. First off, why don't you take a minute, Agnes, and tell us a little bit about who you are as a person and where you live, what you do, and what your background is.
Okay. I can start with the current iteration of where and who I am, which is in Austin, Texas area, where I've been since about 2004. And I work at the University of Texas at Austin in the College of Liberal Arts, which feels a little bit like coming home because my degree was a liberal arts degree originally. And I love working there. I deal with grant scholars, mainly with the Mellon Foundation, students that are doing research, mostly undergrads, but some postdocs and grad students as well. And then I also run this summer program, which is about to start this weekend. Involves over 200 people, and they come from all over the world for like a pre-college experience at UT Austin. So that's about to start. So I love my job there. Other than that, obviously I write haiku, predominantly haiku poems, but also some long form poetry every once in a while. And writing is definitely like my main art form that I do almost daily in some way. But I'm also a musician, so I play oboe in a quintet here with some friends. We've been playing for going on 5 years now. It's really great. We have these performance parties where we've kind of modeled them like an 18th or 19th century salon where we play and then we invite others to play. There's always random people that this is a musician town, so there's always singer-songwriters with guitars, there's pianists, somebody might play trumpet, there's a flamenco dancer, somebody will recite poetry in multiple languages. There's a guy that does these mixology demos that are really fun using various techniques. So yeah, they're really fun parties. So definitely have like this whole musical world that I'm part of. And I also play in orchestras occasionally. There's a new ensemble that brings orchestral music to patients at the Dell Medical School Hospital. So just played a concert in the spring for that, an all Beethoven concert. That was really fun. So yeah, oboe is the main thing that I play, but I also have played flute. That was my first instrument, like from 5th grade, and definitely don't play flute as often as I have before, but I studied jazz flute at one point at the David Bloom School of Jazz in Chicago, and got to play at the Green Dolphin once. That was a really cool, like, sort of showcase gig for all the students. We were put into ensembles immediately and just learned standards and got to perform them at real jazz clubs.
I gotta ask you, do you know Yusuf Lateef?
I love Yusuf Lateef. I have some Yusuf Lateef records that are like my favorite jazz thing to play. It's amazing. Yeah.
He was a Detroit boy.
Oh yeah? Okay.
Yeah. He I think either his wife or something. He lived there. I saw him many times. Yeah, we have a place called Baker's Keyboard Lounge, and the bar is shaped like the back of a piano.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and it was totally after hours. At 2:00 they were forced to close, which meant they locked the front door and the cops couldn't come in.
Nice. That's when the party really got started. I bet.
But he plays jazz. For anyone who doesn't know, that's jazz oboe. First time I ever saw an oboe in a.
He plays jazz oboe too?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I don't have any of his oboe. I mean, he definitely plays the flute. Jazz flute is on the records I have.
He plays anything. He could put 3 holes in a stick and make it sound good. He used to put a table out with all kinds of different flutes, kazoos, everything.
Okay.
In the midst of an 11-minute song, he'd managed to play half of them. He just keep it on. Anyway, that's phenomenal. You know, music is one of the things that I key off of for a lot of my poetry. Almost all of my haiku have some musical connection for some odd reason. That's something. So how do you think that relates to haiku? How does it, is there a connection there that you figured out?
Not so much actually. I mean, I don't like predominantly write about music or anything like that. I tend to compartmentalize those two worlds a bit. Like, you know, I get in writing mode or I get in music mode, but I don't generally mix the two. I mean, certainly I don't bring haiku into my music, but I am trying to bring more musical maybe terms or, you know, because music is inside me and poetry needs to communicate what's inside you, right? So I am trying to incorporate more musical metaphors or musical juxtapositions
Does
into
music
literature.
though, haiku is sort of a release of little moments of you
Yes,
to the world,
exactly.
and the world may never understand what was really going on with you, but they understand something at the universal level. And I've often thought that, and I'm not a musician, although I just adore people who can do it. But the I've often thought that there was a connection there because a lot of haiku poets have musical connections. And I think it's the same way. There's a moment when you let those, when you do something musically that you're sharing with other people, yourself is coming out. Do you think that?
Yeah. Well, and in the abstract sense of the way that language sounds, I mean, I definitely pay attention to the musicality of the language and use a lot of, you know, like maybe internal alliteration or all those really subtle things that you never want to hit anyone over the head with for haiku. But I do tend to think of that and definitely thinking of like the most beautiful sounding words to illustrate the moment instead of like really thinking about the sound of the word. You know, like they say you should always read it out loud to see how it sounds, and that might direct like what word you choose over another word. So I do try to do that just because like I am conscious of the musicality of language that I'm using in the poetry, which I mean all poets probably should do, but yeah, I do try to pay attention to that.
I just think that it is so cool that the oboe and the flute, tremendous instruments. But and because I knew these crazy people, Ma Jamal was there too, great pianist, uh, and they were Detroiters, and back in the day, that was it was total crazy time in the 60s. It had to be there, I guess, and you weren't, I'm guessing.
No, no, I was not. No, not.
I was. Now look at tell me a little bit. I know that I've seen your stuff on Facebook and your posts and things. You have a lovely family.
Yeah, I've got two teens that are I'm almost done raising. I guess. Well, one's about to turn 15 this fall, and the other one's going to be 18 this fall. So the boy is younger, and the girl is older. So she's looking at colleges and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah,
They've been here their whole lives. When I moved here from Chicago, I was actually pregnant with my daughter, and so yeah, she was actually born here. But before that, I was growing up in Chicago since I was 7. So at this point, I'm kind of like half Chicagoan, half Austinite. Spent about half my life in one place, and then the other half in the other. But I was born in Poland, so that's my origin story. Was being born in Poland and emigrating here in the mid '80s when I was 7.
but by the way, we talked about you did a great presentation for the Haiku Society of America meeting here about a month ago, a few weeks ago, and we're going to put a link to that below. I highly recommend people jump on that and find out a little bit about your family history. I had no idea. I told you before this, off camera here, before we were recording, I had no idea you weren't a Texas girl. You've completely fooled me.
Yeah.
But
I think the
oh,
word y'all has worked its way into my vocabulary now at this point enough to where I sound like I'm from Texas, but yeah, don't be fooled. I'm a
I used to spend
European in Chicagoan clothing in a Texas setting now.
I spent a lot of time in Austin, Texas, back in the day. We were I worked for a bank. That's my background. And we were one of the first to loan money to a guy named Michael Dell, obscure at the time.
Wow. Yeah, who's heard of him?
PC's Complete. It wasn't even Dell Corporation back then.
Wow.
The joke was he couldn't sign the first lease. We had to get his CFO to do it because he wasn't 21 yet.
Right. Yeah. He started out that out of his dorm room, as
Yeah,
the tale
we
goes.
but I love Pecan Street. I love coming down there. I spent a lot of time down in Austin, and of course uh, the 2 million bats that you have,
Oh yeah, the
a
Congress.
major attraction. I used
Yeah.
to stay at the Four Seasons, and I'd go next door, just lay on the grass and watch the 2 million bats. For people who don't know, that's we're not joking.
Yeah, they exit and they just follow the course of the river, and it just looks like this cloud of butterflies because they're really they're small bats, and plus they're up high, but it's just like this massive quantity of bats just flowing along the river that get released at dusk. It's really beautiful.
The farmers love them. That's the one thing people miss. Bats aren't a bad thing. We have them here. They manage to get on my security cameras all the time.
Oh, oh that's funny.
But what let's tell me where people can find your work on the internet. I mean, do you I know you post on Facebook and other areas. Do you have favorite places where you post your work?
I tend to repost if I get into like an online journal that has an online presence. I'll at some point afterwards I'll post like the poem and then the link to the journal page that it's on. So for example, the Heron's Nest or sometimes failed haiku, your publication. Um, or what else is a good one? Tiny Words, places that already live online. I tend not to. A lot of people do like where they take a screenshot of a printed journal, and I don't generally do that. I feel like I like to see it in the book. Like if I'm subscribing to the actual print journal, I like to look at it in the print journal, and unless it's like something that maybe won an award, and I want to take a picture of the paper, because
Yeah.
like if you win any one of the Japanese contests, they send you this like beautiful gilded certificate with scrolly writing, and that makes a really cool post. I like doing that. But yeah, I think I have a robust submission schedule calendar. I keep it on a Google Calendar so that it's always coming up. Like I get the notification like time to submit to Frog Pond. It'll come up like on my watch, on my phone, on my computer, on my other computer, and I set it up so that it reminds me a month before, 2 weeks before, and the day of, just in case I've totally spaced out and missed it. So I have this like system of checks and balances in place to make sure I don't forget to submit to all the places with all the deadlines. And I add stuff to that calendar all the time. I mean, there's all these new journals too, like Suridoro
Right.
and First Frost and Continuum with a K and two U's. So I like to submit to all those. Whales, Autumn Haiku Journal. Um, Generally, if it has somebody I really respect associated with it and editing it, and as well as people that I know and respect also getting published in it, then I'll tend to submit to it. And some of the other ones, like if I don't like the way that it's laid out, I'll get in there at least once or twice, but then I step back from submitting just because I don't
Yeah.
like it. Like there's one journal that does this like crazy like magenta color with like yellow text, and it's too much for me. The poems in there are lovely, and I'll read it every once in a while, but I don't want my work
Well,
necessarily in there.
I'll tell you, you've hit on one of my favorites, and it's a sort of a gold mine of its own. Is the Heron's Nest, because I've been reading that since it was a print publication.
Yeah, that's
I
when I
had
first
every
started. It was
copy.
only print. Hmm.
I had every copy. I never ever missed it. And John Stevenson could be probably the best haiku poet ever. I don't know where he fits on your thing, but if he isn't in your top 10, probably you don't write haiku.
No, he's definitely, yeah.
Yeah, he's like Roberta Beery, Alexis Rotilla, and Paul Miller.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of people that but Heron's Nest has them all. And because when they became digitized, now it's like a little just a wonderful place to go. But my two favorites, and we'll see what you think. My two favorite print publications, nothing against any others. For I love Frog Pond, I love Modern Haiku, but I absolutely adore Mayfly and Acorn.
Yeah. I love Acorn. I've also been, I think the first poem, or one of the first poems I ever got published back in like 2004 was in Acorn, back when AC
AC Messias.
Matthias was the editor. Yep. And then Mayfly, I've only gotten that. I've only gotten in there once. I do love that they do the Haiga illustrations. I think Lydia usually does them.
Right.
Erasmus. Yeah, so that's really beautiful and very sparse. I mean, I think they only take a very small handful.
15.
15. There we go. Yeah.
It's tough. It's a strainer. Gene Murtha, my friend before he passed away, he always complained he never got into Mayfly.
Yeah, it's always a no. But I got in once, so I'm like, tick that box. But I'll keep trying.
Yeah, and Acorn has had 3 wonderful editors. I mean, Carolyn Hall, and now Susan Antolin. I mean,
yeah, they really keep the torch high for that journal. I've never seen anything that I remotely even questioned in there. It's really, really, really refined and great, and I'm so grateful to ever get in it. It's great.
And they're good people. The other thing is that good publications attract good people. It's like John Stevenson has his crew of 4 there. There isn't a clinker among them. I mean, if you want to find good editors and poach somebody, you'd poach them out of there.
Also, Tanya McDonald's new publication, Kingfisher, I found to be absolutely rock solid from the start, and I love submitting there as well. And I like the small size. You think about these journals that you take in your backpack when you go hiking or whatever. That and Acorn are just the perfect size to take along and read. Sometimes Akitsu Quarterly will be like that too because it's small and square. But anything bigger than that is harder to take along as your inspiration for hiking.
Yeah, I think that and I'm terrible. You're a very organized person, I can tell, and I'm terrible. I can go months without submitting anything to anybody, and then occasionally somebody will say, "I haven't seen your work around. Are you okay?" So, well, I'm writing like crazy, but I forgot to submit. So you're doing a lot better than me.
I have everything in a spreadsheet. Sometimes my poems get written in triplicate, so because I enjoy the physical process of writing it. I have a very lovely notebook, and I only write in it using an ink pen or calligraphy pen, right? So everything goes in here first, and then I'll copy it into the spreadsheet because haiku fit really well into Excel cells. And then I'll every time it gets submitted, there's a codification system for what it's submitted to, what rejects it, and whether it's currently under submission or not. And like sometimes things will get rejected 13, 14 times, and it's just making its way through all the editors. It's like not a judgment on the poem at all. And until it's gone through every editor at least once without any edits, I just consider it to be totally fresh and new and submittable. So it's nice to keep track once you get past 10, like, okay, Acorn rejected it, Modern Haiku. Oh, I never sent this to Frog Pond yet. And like, a lot of the time that'll be like finally get in somewhere.
You are so far ahead of me. But everything with me is digital. I haven't written a poem in a book. I had moleskins that were so high. It was costing me, $500 a year to buy moleskins. So I thought, can't do this anymore. Switch to the digital. But that's an interesting approach to it. But the one thing I want to hone in on is we all have our work not accepted. Doesn't matter how many, you can be Michael Dillon Welsh, he's got 4,000 or something publications. He still gets turned down. Nobody by just says, oh, it's Michael Dillon Welsh, I guess I don't have to look at it now.
Totally.
Doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. And it's the same with everyone I know. And you're very determined. You remind me of a little bit of Roberta Beery in that regard. You keep, if you really believe in a poem and you think you've got something, keep trying.
Yeah.
But see, I'm terribly lazy. I get 2 or 3 turn downs on a poem, and I go, I'll show them. We'll put it on Facebook. I'll get 100 likes.
Yeah,
sometimes, no offense, I got to tell you, sometimes you put it on Facebook, you get 5 likes, and it's your wife is one.
Yeah, you hear crickets.
Know why they turned it down.
Yeah.
But you're very organized. That's a good thing. But how do you handle the thought of rejection? Is a funny thing. Some people get very freaked out about it.
Okay.
I don't think you do.
I will admit I get freaked out about contests because if I've chosen to enter, and I'm talking about the big contests, which continue to elude me for 2 decades now. All right, so like the Spies contest and the Henderson are 2 main ones that I can think of right now. And yeah, it's like I will save my best work. Like I will save that all year. I will continue honing it. I'll be like, this is it. This is the one. This is the year. They're gonna, I get these visions of grandeur, right? Like this is where everything has been leading to, and then it just doesn't even get an honorable mention or anything. And I'm like, what is wrong with it, or what's wrong with me? And sometimes it'll be years, and I'll look at that poem and be like, oh, okay, I see how that was not a winner. But other times I'm like, I'll submit it to the first journal I submitted to after that, it'll get published because I'm like, I knew it was good. They just like whatever the judge was at that contest just didn't happen to like it or whatever. But
that's a lesson. That's a lesson for everybody. Is it contests when you judge contests, you get I judged the Vigilio one time, which is with kids, and that contest we got 3,000 entries. Okay, and of course there's some of them on the bottom of the line. They're easy. You just wonder why did they ever suspect that this would be acceptable.
Those are the easy ones to reject. Yeah.
But particularly with the kids, you cry because they're writing about their grandmother dying and something. And even though the poem may not be chosen, it's just like you're going, oh my God, or a divorce or their dog. And you go, all these kids are having real life experiences. That's the thing that the people need to understand is that when you have a contest, and by the way, I've judged the Brady, I've judged the Henderson. Okay. Ask me if I've won.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad now that it's over. I'm only going to get one shot at each of those contests. Now somebody should have looked it up and said, has he ever won any of this?
Yeah, I always thought like once you win, then they ask you to judge it at some point later. That's what it seemed like. But
it's an interesting thing though, that people worry about handling not getting their work accepted. How do you feel about the work that never gets accepted? You still keep it, right?
Yeah, I still keep it. There's a few. Okay, so here's a sneaky thing I did because I got to be the editor of the Southwest, the Haiku Society of America Southwest Region Anthology, and so there was going to be a page for me, and I was like, this is the perfect time for me to put these. I had 6 poems that I've just been rejecting. They've been rejected for a decade, and I was like, this is my chance to get these freaking things published because I think they're great, but maybe they're common imagery. I don't even care anymore. I like them still, and I believe in them, and I put them in my own damn book. so I did ask the regional coordinator what she thought. I'd like to get the 6th one out because I could put 5 in there, and so she's like, this one's my least favorite, so why don't you go put put the other ones in. I was like, good enough for me. So I finally got those out of the way. I can stop. Finally, I can stop submitting them anywhere else because now they're in a book, and I had full control of that, and that's just fine.
Yeah, well, I've always, when I did short stuff, we did 24 issues of those a long time ago. That was a long time ago, 15, 16 years ago. And I started, I always snuck some of my work in. I did the same thing as you.
Right?
And we did the same, carried the same thing over in failed haiku. And Kelly and Brian are doing that now too.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that because I felt like a little bit guilty, but also like I've been like screaming in like an empty room, like why don't you like these poems? I know they're good, but yeah, then
It's
that's the power we have when we get to edit. So why not?
Yeah, well, and editors are just self-appointed people. I appointed myself an editor. I didn't get picked by my peers. No offense. I think I've done okay, but that's it. And I always wonder. I mean, it's like, and one of my idols in editing is Charles Trumbull. He was what I love Paul Miller. I love him to death. But I still look at, I love Lee Gurgaon. But Charles, that's the guy I want. If somebody ever compared me to him, and they haven't yet, so I think I'm out. That would be the one. But
Yeah.
how do you feel about how do you feel about what you create? How attached do you become? You seem like you're focused on it. How much do you write? How many poems do you write in a year? And what percentage do you think get published? What's your guess? I'm curious.
Yeah, my spreadsheet actually told me what percentage get published. And it was actually higher than I thought, but I don't want to say that without looking at my spreadsheet because I tend to remember numbers very wrong. But right now I've been so busy like honing my other skills in the haiku world, like judging things, editing, presenting, that I've been writing a little bit less, and I haven't taken as many writing trips. Like if I take a hiking trip for the sole purpose of writing, I'll come home from that with probably 30 haiku, of which I would say at least five wind up getting published. Very, very rough estimate.
That's a great batting average.
Yeah.
If I get to 1%, I'm very happy.
Yeah. And within a year, I mean, so I've had some off years where, especially when I started having kids, like they were little, I didn't have as much time to write. But so I've had over 560 published lifetime, but like it was, it started like a slow trickle in 2004, and the bulk of that has been like, per year in the last few years has been like, 80, 90, 70 per year since like 2014 or 15.
Cool.
The last few years have been really great to me. Like I feel like I've come into the craft finally, whereas before it was like all these random efforts, and one would land every once in a blue moon, and I would just keep reading and reading and reading. Anytime I read like in bulk, like all the journals I've subscribed to, the stuff that comes out of my brain comes out much better, and has a bigger success rate at conveying what I want it to convey, and also like speaking to other people in ways I never even expected it to speak to them, right? Because once you write it, it takes off a life of its own, and people get stuff out of it that you know.
Well, you put a cap on it. The best way to learn about haiku is to read good haiku. Yeah. And once you get your own published, all of a sudden then it becomes part of the game, which brings me to this question. Mm-hmm. How did you start? How did you get interested in haiku, and what has sustained your passion for it? Because you clearly have.
Yeah, well, the way I got into it, I wrote a lot of long poems as a way of like, organizing my emotions around certain things. And then haiku was like a really fun thing to do at first. It was some stupid online contest via like some Chicago newspaper, like the Sun Times or something even lesser than the Sun Times. Just they had like sort of a magnetic set of poetry letters, like 50 words or so, and then maybe like a picture, and you were supposed to like write a funny caption, but in 575 haiku. And so I just, at the very beginning, I just liked being able to write something very short and try to make it pretty and interesting with very limited factors. And then somehow at some point, I guess, I wanted to see where haiku was being published, and I may have tried to send some of these horrible attempts to whatever first thing came across my radar. But I also joined Yahoo groups, which there were some really great early Yahoo groups, Haiku Talk or something like that, and a lot of great people were on there, from what I remember. And eventually, I put some of my attempts there in those Yahoo groups, and I got feedback, and then I saw other people giving other people feedback, and that it all started to make more sense as time went on. And also some of the early stuff I submitted, John Stevenson wrote me back very kind and detailed email about, like, he's like, oh, I can see you're new at this, and but you clearly have a very poetic mind. Here's some more resources for, how to make it better. And then the other thing that happened was I wanted to know if there were any local haiku writers in Chicago, and Charles Trumbull actually had a local Chicago group, and I went to some of their meetings, and that definitely led me in a good direction. He had I don't remember who else was at those meetings, definitely him, maybe Chris Patchell at that point was already in it. I don't quite remember who was in that room, but it was maybe 7 people or so. But yeah, hearing them read their poems and then hear them workshopping each other was just like, oh, this is a whole different ballgame. So I became, more aware of what we consider real haiku to be like.
Yeah. Well, what sustains you in it? Why did people get grabbed by it because it is sort of a unique little corner of the poetry world. We all start with free verse or something, and then what about it kept you going? I'm just curious. Maybe there is no answer, but
yeah, I tend to have a sort of a very busy life. Like, I'm always going somewhere and planning things and looking for events to enrich my life with and things like that. And so this is the most portable poetry form. You can write it while waiting at a bus stop or at a stoplight, or remembering your day, or just also, like, I tend to be a very watchful person. Like, I'm always just observing things, and this way of, like, seeing the deeper detail of the world around me, and like capturing whatever that is, like whatever might be special about it. And it's literally like very simple stuff, and of course haiku is meant to be very simple language, but just like the birds on electrical wires are sitting and just so, and you're just like captivated by that for a second, and then you think, okay, well, what else am I thinking about that? Why does that seem so special to me right now? And trying to write a haiku about that, or especially being outside and hiking too. And you just want to, like, because usually you just hike through a terrain and you feel it, and you're getting exercise and breathing fresh air and all that, but just like getting down on the ground and seeing what the bugs and the flowers are doing, and almost like microscopically zooming in on all these things, and just like really feeling the great details of the environment that you're traveling through. And it just like deepens your appreciation of where you are at that time, and helps you remember that particular hiking trip, And also looking up the names of the flowers and the creatures that you might be seeing, I feel like it's a learning opportunity as well. Like, knowing that something is a certain type of flower in Texas, or I don't know, it's a good learning opportunity.
I live next to Thompson Harbor State Park. Just take a walk out the door and be in it in less than 2 minutes. And I had the same experience. And I like hiking is sort of like a walking meditation. It settles you down and you just sort of, you become a part of everything that's going on in the forest. And I live in the forest. We've got 6 acres of old oak. So I have the same experience. I like hiking. I think you take those steps, and then I don't write things down like you, but as you might guess, I have a smartphone. So I verbally toss my ideas out so I don't I don't forget. Sometimes it's nothing more than the name of a haibun, a title for a haibun.
Yeah.
I better write about that kind of thing. And I throw the title in and I come back to it. And it's an interesting part of the experience. But I guess that the 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 whole nature of it being a haiku, specifically being a nature poem, but how do you feel about senryu? Does that come out of your own personal experience, interpersonal relationships with friends, or how does that get generated? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think with the senryu, it's more like when it's emotionally driven and when it comes out of a moment that's not so much rooted in something that you're hearing from nature. Just like going back to the whole forest hiking thing, usually after a certain point, and I tend to hike solo if I'm on a writing mission, and it's like I'm literally listening to the landscape and what it can tell me, and it's I get my mind in this like oxygenated space of meditation, like you were saying, and then it's like I can just like things I look at will tell me things about themselves, right? Like the way roots might look like snakes, or the way tree leaves are shimmering in just such a way that reminds me of something else, like applause, or whatever metaphors pop into my head. So that's the stuff I like to write down. Whereas with the senryu, it's not coming so much from the nature. It's coming from the deep internal thoughts that you have all the time, and what's going on in your life, what may be going on with your family, your love life, things like that. And so that's where that stuff tends to come out of, more emotions, like whatever emotion is at the forefront, and what words come out of that.
I think though that both of them, in both senryu and haiku, you have an interest. It's the connectedness to whatever's around you.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think that's the simple way of looking at it. It's what exactly flipped the switch for you at that particular moment.
Yeah.
And I find that, you know, uh, both are as interesting to me. I write, although I'm edited a senryu journal for years, uh, not anymore, but I I write more than half my poems are haiku. So I it's an interesting thing because half my life is spent. You have half your life to think and relax, your waking life anyway, and the other is spent, you know, with your friends and family and other poets, things like that. It's a
Yeah, there's just like drive to just withdraw, or capture the essence of any given moment. And I don't know why exactly we're driven to that. I guess because time passes us by very quickly, right? A lot of the time. And so this creates like a stopping point of reckoning, and a stopping point of I don't know. It's like creating a very specific kind of memory if you can write it down in this little 3-line conglomeration of what's going on, and it like helps you make sense of it.
yeah.
And
It's cheaper than a psychiatrist. Look at it that way. Strangely enough, most haiku poets, as odd a bunch of characters as we are. I am. You're probably same. Uh, the as odd as we may be, and when we're together, I don't think there's anybody who's maladjusted. They're all because you get to put it all down on paper. You get it out of your system. Good, the bad, the ugly, the
yeah,
strange, the questions you have.
it's
That's
not passing you by. You're actually striving to like make sense of it and capture it in some way, and in a way that could be significant to other people. Like, I mean, that's the whole point of it. Eventually, is to share it, hopefully, and if you understand something about yourself, then it can help somebody else understand something about themselves when they read it.
well, talk to me a little bit. I mean, I had the similar experience on Yahoo Groups. Marlene Mountain had her Yahoo group, eponymously named Marlene Mountain.
Oh, oh, I
Everything.
think I was part of that for a while. I think that's how I became her Facebook friend, just sort of in the last few years of her life. So I was like, oh my god, I'm friends with my Facebook friends with one of my idols.
And we had one called Basho's Beatniks,
Okay.
which is was another one, and it was the World Haiku Club, which I spent a lot of time on.
Yeah, isn't Takiguchi was the
Yeah,
leader of that? Yeah.
yeah. I had dinner with him one time in London.
Oh,
I worked for a company there, and we sat down and had a nice dinner together in London, and that was so cool. Uh, and if you ever get a chance to meet him, he was wearing a tweed suit. He looked like an Englishman, with a little cap, little
oh
tweed
my
cap,
God, like full
tweed
on.
tie. Definitely had crossed over into the Cambridge side of of Japan, if there is one. But anyway, tell me a little bit about who else do you consider your role models? Who are the people who you look to, or the poetry, the poets that you look for inspiration or for guidance? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I have a few favorites that when a journal is published, I'll flip to the index sometimes and look for their names first. One person whose poems I really always enjoy, and I've never met him or seen what he looks like. He doesn't go to the virtual conferences or anything, but Ernest Witt. He's a Polish guy. He lives somewhere in Poland, and I just really love the way he thinks, and almost anytime he gets published, I really really like what it is. My favorite poem of his is one he wrote kind of ekphrastically about a Picasso piece. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. It's something like Picasso, I see different wife, my in a way. It's the most nonsensical thing ever, but it makes so much sense when you're looking at a Picasso to have the words of the haiku be completely split up and triangulated out of order, and like it just tickles this part of my brain. I love it so much. Um, and Marlene Mountain definitely was a huge influence in the beginning. Yeah, my first introduction not only to the one line haiku, but the way she plays with space and makes letters like jump over other letters, just some like, and the the kittens and the numbers, that one as they're being born, and the wetness of the kittens coming out, and just it's like haiku art. The concrete element of her work was
Well,
really
she was an
inspiring.
artist. She was a painter, and a damn good one. And the other thing about her that I like, and that you feel that I wonder if you were touched by, was there was no topic that was foreign to her.
Oh yeah,
She
absolutely.
could
They're
touch
always
every third rail at the same time.
yeah. She went into politics, feminism. She's strongly feminist and like very like down to earth hippie. Like you know, there's something about like she's bleeding into her garden or something. At one point, I was like, yes, like she's just so like earthy and all that, and not afraid of any topic, or specifically not very female things. As well. So that was really inspiring. In a still fairly male predominant world of haiku, but we definitely have a lot more strong women role models now around.
Yeah, you've noticed it.
Yeah.
I have a prejudice, and I'm honest about it. I prefer women in poetry to men. I love them all. Don't get me wrong, but Roberta Beery, Alexis Rotella, Terry French, one of the sweetest people, Kelly
Yeah.
Savage
Oh yeah, I love
Moyer,
Kelly's work.
Kelly Savage Moyer.
Right, Kelly
Yeah,
Moyer.
she married my brother Robert. But yeah, and I think that um, quite often the deepest baritone sometimes carries the day. Probably shouldn't be that way, but the I think that women have a better sense of nature, and they have a better uh, tool set. I almost think it's genetic, but who knows? For human relationships, they have a much deeper way of it. I say that I have someone in the other room who's an inspiration to me. You wouldn't have been talking to me. I'd have been dead by the time I was 30.
Oh my gosh,
I was doing crazy.
very inspiring.
I was crazy at high speed, and my wife has saved my life, but she didn't know it. She didn't try to necessarily. She just did it.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things, and that's one of the things that I enjoyed most about Marlene. Is it? And by the way, she, Roberta, Terry, any one of them that I've mentioned, there's a dozen more. I'm leaving out Carol Raisfeld. Oh my God.
Oh, she's funny. I see her on Facebook, and man, she has all that, like she has all that funny stuff that's very senryu, like with puns and all that, and it's like it just makes me laugh. But then she'll whip out like some deep, profound, like Heron's Nest poem as well. So it's like, yeah, it's not just the funny off the wall stuff. That's just what she puts on Facebook. But I really appreciate her personality. I would love to meet her sometime.
Yeah. Uh, she's right now she's recovering. She had a fall, and
That's right. Yeah.
so, but she's another one. I could keep naming them, but those are the people who influenced me.
Yeah. There's somebody I co-wrote with early on, Hortensia Anderson. Do you remember her?
God, yes.
Yeah, she
Oh,
and I had an email correspondence, and we co-wrote a Junicho Renku, I think, at some point, and with John Carley was also in that group.
oh
I
yeah, oh
got to
yeah.
write some collaborative stuff with him, and
Haiku Reckoner, yeah,
yeah, and Norman Darlington as well, and
yes.
Hortensia, and yeah, so
Hortensia was one of my favorites. Her collection of Haibin, and she wrote Haibin like nobody else.
mhm.
She did not have a printing press. She had her own. She stamped everything.
Oh wow,
She was unbelievable. And it's so sad when she passed away. And John too. He was another inspiration. I was supposed to meet him in London. We missed synced on a meeting. I got tied up with something else called work, and I, and he passed away. And there are so many people that have had an influence. Hortensia Anderson left an imprint on every poet she ever worked with. Ron Moss, another one, my friend, great, great poet. But yeah, who
yeah.
else? I'm curious. You got some
Um,
good,
I'm
good
really
lineage here.
really inspired by Jim Cation. He's kind of like my litmus test for if I want to be involved with a new journal I've never heard of. I was like, oh, he's on the editorial board, or oh, he's got poems in there. Okay, like that like elevates it instantly for me. And certainly John Stevenson, just
Yeah.
because he's at like the core of all haiku. He's inside it. I mean, he gets it, and he's also a beautiful person and wonderful to talk to. I spent some time with him in Arkansas this past November. I felt like I really got to know him well. He's a great person to hang out with. Um, yeah,
You have his book, his latest
my red.
offering, My Red.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Yep.
God, that's a tour de force. I'm going to do a review of it, but I love it.
Yeah, Bill Cooper and I chose that as the first place winner in the Merit Book Awards, which I was just judging, and yeah, it was like hands down. I was like, you know, the other two books that were in our three, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, like clearly we can't give this to anybody other than John Stevenson. Like, he's he's the
It's
master here.
and people say, well, but he always wins. Well, I'm sorry, he always writes good poems.
But yeah, that's
That's
because
the
he
way
really
life is. I judged the Touchstone Award this year too. It was the same way. I mean, there's 5 judges, and it all came really quickly.
yeah
To There wasn't a contest about My Red because
yeah
and Randy and Shirley Brooks, who do Mayfly and also published this particular one, they're phenomenal. So,
yeah
and the way they approached it, this is like a contest. This would be a lesson for you about contests. He started by submitting 2,000 poems. You read it? Did you read the book, The Process?
yeah. I mean, he's
And
lucky
then
enough
they
to
honed it down, and then
yeah
they had a group of people who honed it down. And so if you can find a clinker in there, I got news for you. there's probably a dozen well-versed editors who had a crack at it before you.
Yes, I would like a panel of 8 people helping me winnow down my work to a publishable great book, please. Where can I sign up for that?
Well, you can actually. Here's what I like to do, and I do it a lot.
Yeah.
Is I do Busan challenges with multiple people,
Hmm.
and you write 10 poems a day for 100 days, and you critique each other's work, not in a bad way, in a friendly way.
Yeah.
And you have the promise of anonymity, because anyone who sees 1,000 poems of mine will see 900 clinkers that will stop your car cold, and
Yeah, it's like,
maybe 100 that are worth working on somewhere in there. Like I got something to, and there's a few that come out of the brain fully formed. But that's the other thing I want to ask you. What's your process in terms of working on your own haiku? How do you approach it when you got a poem and you think, I got a B minus here. How do I make it an A?
yeah, yeah, exactly. That is the question. Yeah, it's sometimes like you said, they arrive fully formed, and I, anytime I look back at it, I'm like, still like it, great, great, great. Um, but then sometimes what I tend to do is I'll reread everything because they're all in that spreadsheet. I'll just like play Russian roulette and just scroll and just start reading them all, and a lot of time it's like nope, 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 still nope, still nope, and I'm like, oh, that's actually interesting. That would be something from like 2007. Like I totally forgot about it. I was like, I really like that juxtaposition. I haven't actually seen that in a while in any of the journals. I should work on this, and then I'll move stuff around. I'll experiment with flipping that first and third line, seeing if that makes it better, giving it a different pivot, changing out one of the, like if I named one flower, I'm like, okay, would this other flower be better? Like I don't have to stay that true to the original image. Like whatever, it was a sycamore, it was an oak. Maybe sycamore would work better because it'll be in the middle line and it'll make it longer. And sycamore is a more beautiful word. I don't know.
Maybe
So I'll
it's
play,
tree.
or just tree. Yeah, I'd like to try to name the tree or the flower nowadays because I'm like, flower, tree, bird. Yes. Um, yeah, we're all like junior birders in training here because after a while you just get sick of saying bird and you want to know what kind of bird. And then I'm like deep in field guides of Texas, the birds of Texas. Okay, it had an orange beak, gray feathers, blah, 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 and sometimes the name of the bird is some ridiculously long thing that's like
Yeah.
not going to fit in the poem at all. I'm like, okay, never mind. But yeah, the other cool thing, actually, Kelly was telling me about this, and it's like an editing tip that Lee Gurga and she discussed, and it was flipping 2 words that, like the 2 end words completely in a way that may not make sense, but sometimes that like totally enriches the poem.
Yeah.
That's not going to work in every setting, but yeah, I found just like completely flipping 2 of the nouns leads to very interesting places, and I might let it marinate like that for a little bit and see if I like it.
Well, flipping the fragment phrase is the most common thing.
Yeah,
That's an easy one sometimes, and sometimes it makes a poem that's absolutely generates no enthusiasm in a reader a whole lot more interesting if you just do that. And the other 2 words that I love playing with the most, the.
Oh my God, the and the, yes, you can do a lot
I
of
think I spend more time on those 2 words.
driving yourself crazy with that. Yeah, also if you can make a pivot line in the middle, sometimes that's like, ooh, like that doesn't have to start off that way. That could be the pivot in the middle, and that makes all the difference for making it have that sort of like, the infinity sign feeling where you just want to read the poem over and over again because it like because of that pivot. Like you just constantly want to go back through the pivot because it's like, oh, it means this when you pair it with the first line, it means that when you pair it with the last line, and you just like get a tingle in your brain reading that.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned Lee Gurga. I mean, Lee Gurga has he takes risks. He'll walk right off the cliff.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a problem with it. And Jim Cation can do the same thing. He can he in his own work. We always think of him as the Haiku Foundation and everything else. he's actually a hell of a poet and a hell of an editor too.
Yeah.
People sometimes drop that off. They get focused on Red Moon, think he's a publisher, the
No,
Haiku
no.
Foundation. They think, well, he's got this website. They forget, he's done it all too. He's very much like John Stevenson. What they
Yeah.
haven't done in haiku is probably doesn't need to happen.
Yeah, I think of Jim as a poet first, just because I really love his work, for sure.
I've got to see him in action a few times, and the Haiku Foundation is one of my absolute favorite places, and I love it. So that's another one that kicks it. Uh, what haiku is not just one thing, you know that. I mean, there's haiku, there's haiga, there's haiben, there's renge, renku. I take it from some of our conversation so far that what areas do you participate in? What areas interest you the most right now?
Definitely predominantly haiku, but I am trying to get more into writing haibun and definitely haiga because I've been getting more into art and doing art more. Like I always did photography since my school days, and so trying to incorporate more photography to create haiga, but also working with. Actually, I love to do collage, so trying to do more of that. And then also I have friends who are artists completely outside of the haiku world, and I love collaborating with them. Like for example, there's a friend of mine is actually a doctor in.
Whoop, I think we froze here. This happens occasionally. Oh, we just
So
froze there for a minute. Can you give you froze just a tad?
oh.
My apologies. Can you I guess we're catching up now.
Okay.
Okay. Uh the but you mentioned Hortensia. Hyben is something you're.
Yeah, it's something I'm definitely interested in. Specifically, I talked about it in my presentation a little bit, like the idea of turning old stories into current haibun. So I have old a lot of old journals that lend themselves really well to translating into haibun. The way like Maggie Chula had a great book that we actually gave an honorable mention to in the Merit Awards, where she took the 20 years that she lived in Kyoto and turned that into sort of a narrow road to the interior of her own, where she, summarized it in these beautiful haibun with haiku, and it just like took me inside of her 20 years living in Japan. And I'm like, okay, if I can do that with my own former journals and turn that into stories that I use sort of the wisdom of the time I have now to write the haiku now that would go with those past stories and narratives, like that seems like such a golden opportunity to me. And like some of it is already written. um, and I'm definitely still learning about haibun. Like I don't quite know what makes them tick yet, but like I've had some success here and there with getting them published, so you know I just need to read more of them, I think, to get it better.
Well, Jennifer Hambrick wrote a good collection called Joyride.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get it?
I read that, yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that one.
That was
And
good.
but how about linked verse? You referred to that a little bit.
Yes, so at every HNA I've been to, I've done those late night Renku writing sessions that somebody leads, like the 36 verse one, and I love participating in those. I just like the whole process of like the competitive rush to fulfill the requirements of whatever the next verse is, and like thinking outside the box, and but also inside the box of the current rules, and like trying to think of something that someone hasn't thought of yet to incorporate. Um, that's needed for the next verse. So I really enjoy that process. Definitely the process of writing it the most. But in terms of other collaborations, I mainly write the really short gem bun with Kelly. She and I have done just a whole slew of those. We really riff those off of each other really well. And I
I
also
seen some.
enjoy, yeah. um, we also I've also written a lot of renge with different people. That can be like a really great intimate back and forth conversation that happens. So I have, maybe 5 or 6 people that I've written with. I'm writing one right now with Jonathan Roman. He's a poet out of Brooklyn, New York, and he and I have written like 3 or 4 so far, and we're just finishing up another couple now. And Jeff Hogan and I have written a lot. We've just both gotten really busy lately, but we're always like, "Hey, let's write a renge," and we're like, "Totally!" And then it's like 2 months go by again, and we're like, "Dang it!"
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. So I have the advantage of being retired now, so I have no excuses. If I'm not writing, it's all on me. But what what do you look for when you read other poets? What are the things that you look for? What are the things that interest you in someone else's work? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it definitely has to have some kind of emotional impact that's personal to me for it to feel like most significant. Um, and I tend to also like the ones that are like very simple and shorter, and just something that like feels like something I could have thought or that I've experienced recently. Stuff like that. And generally reading things like Acorn or Frog Pond or Modern Haiku, almost most of the haiku in there, and Heron's Nest. That's kind of like my probably top four. Um, almost every poem will get you to go in that way, and I just love that. I just love like it's like these little petit fours, right? Like little intricate French pastries, and I just like love eating it and then being like, yes, that is a whole aspect of life right there. And so yeah, that's I think that's what I look for, and it just makes me reflect, and I'll read a few pages, and then I'll like run over to my notebook because it'll immediately inspire me with something that
Well,
something that yeah.
Eric Ahman said that back in the 60s that a haiku is a collaboration between the poet and the reader.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I can't put myself in 8 or 12 syllables. I can't suddenly become Agnes. Okay, I can't get into your life. I can't drop into your experience. But if you leave enough room for me, I'll squeeze my own life into that. And who cares whether I'm having an experience that's different from yours? I have had people, I won't tell you when it happened. It was the war in Iraq a long time ago. Although we can't seem to get out of that habit. Anyway, I wrote a poem, and unsolicited, a very well-known poet who I adored wrote me back a long fat paragraph and said, "That's the best anti-war poem I've ever read." And of course I was thrilled and happy. And I said, to have that notoriety. And I showed my wife, and she said, "That's nice, honey." She said, "Does he know that you weren't writing about the war?"
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. I was writing about a friend's suicide.
Oh, wow.
Which was, she knew what I was writing about, but
Yeah.
he could never have known. And so, and you wanted to put it on something and publish it. And I said, sure, of course. So, but if that worked for you as an anti-war poem, I'm thrilled with it. You know, that's the kind of thing that happens all the time to all of us, I guess.
Yeah, that's where the magic really truly lies. It's the silent, unspoken fourth line of the 3-line haiku, and that fourth line is what's written in the reader's mind the second they finish reading yours, or they've gone back to the beginning, they've read it again, and there's something written in their head that corresponds to that poem, and that's the real magic, is what it means to the reader and what it just made the reader think. Is not necessarily what you just said. It's whatever it made them think of.
Yeah, and I think that the fun part of it is in haiku that a lot of people forget is if they try and tell too much, particularly in the beginning, you try and tell your whole story, irrelevant to the reader. Share the experience, that the response you had to the situation, and aha, now it's much more universal.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that Latin phrase, in medias res, like in the middle of the action. You want to just give them enough of the center of what's happening, and then they can fill in all the extra context with their own life, you know. So yeah, that is a fine line. Like you want them to have enough details to be like to have something to go on, but not all the details. Don't overstate it. Don't overword it. There's so much overwording happening in the early writing. You gotta pull it back.
And
Maybe
there's
take
always,
some words.
I don't know any haiku poet who doesn't still write free verse. You've got something more to say and you want to be really specific and tell a story. But I found, and here's the hint, where I channel that one is into a haibun.
Yeah.
I got plenty of space there, and I can sneak 2 or 3 poems in if I want to. Terry French wants one of my super long haibuns, and at first she did try and tell me. She said, "Do you want to try and shorten it down?" I said, "Nah, couldn't tell the story in that time." And she published it. She liked it. She liked it right from the beginning. She said, "I'm going to publish it, but are you sure you don't want to make it shorter?" No. Shorter might appeal to somebody, but it wouldn't tell my story. It was about a bar that I enjoyed in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, that was the 60s. But what are you? Do you have any projects or anything you're working on now? Do you have any plans to have a book of your own or a chapbook or something?
Yeah, 100%. Now that I've gotten past two significant things, which was making this presentation for the virtual H&A, that I put a lot of work into that, and even just organizing the work that I was going to feature in it was a big learning process. And then also judging the Merit Book Awards and having to read 64 books in a matter of 2 months really got into my head, like what's good and what's not good, you know. And even going back to like judging and editing, both of those things have informed my sense of what I want in my own book moving forward. So like reading the almost 1500 cherry blossom haiku for the Vancouver contest a couple of years ago, judging that, and then editing that Southwest anthology. So all of those I feel like have led me to this perfect moment here to start putting a collection together. I just don't know, because I don't have my panel of 8 learned readers to help me. I feel like I'm not a great judge of my own work. And some, like, I know I have my favorites, and I have ones where I'm like, I never knew why that editor even took that, but there it is. So like, how do I narrow down the 560 things I have into more of a book length, and what do I keep out, and how many unpublished ones do I put in there? Those are all questions I have. I have a better sense of what's good and what's not good based on the things I just said. So I really just need to start and see where that gets me, because yeah, I just have a lot going on in my personal life and work life right now. But I feel like once the end of the summer hits and the beginning of the fall starts, I will be in like scholarly putting a book together mode. And
Cool.
I might call on some of my Renge partners, or even friends that have edited things, and see if they'd be willing maybe to be that sort of informal panel. You know, maybe that is what I need, some 3 or 4 learned, trusted people that can sort of act like
Ellie
my
Savage
own.
Moyer has the sharpest eye for me. She knows how to pick them, so she's very good. And
She is.
Brian Rickert, also, you have 2 editors of failed haiku, both of whom will work with almost anybody,
Okay.
and and
Good to
and
know
will
about Brian too. I
and
did not know.
your work, I would tell you, I'll buy the book.
Yay.
Yeah, because
I'm
I'll tell
going
you,
next summer. Woohoo.
you write very well. You have everything, all the chops to do it, but there's no rush, you know. You have the time to think about it. But if John Stevenson had to narrow it down from 2,000 to a few hundred, to a couple hundred, yeah, I mean, we all go through that process. And some of the work that's been published so many times, I'm bored with it.
Yeah.
I might never include it because
Right.
yeah, I say, yeah, it's been out there. Who needs it? I'm
Yeah.
tired of it. It's like, you know, Paul McCartney. He's gonna sing the old Beatles songs forever. But
Yeah.
uh, what do you what do you want people to take away from this interview? What do you want them to think happened? What do you want them to think about Agnes? Who is she?
Huh. Well, yeah, just a person who's very busy but finds time for haiku in their life and keeps the poetry flags flying even if life gets crazy, as a way of slowing down time and as a way of sort of organizing one's own memories and not letting these seemingly insignificant things pass you by. Um, the cliche of stopping to smell the roses, right? Except we're stopping to see the tiny snails. We're stopping to see um, the way the light hits a child's face in the morning, or the way the wind is making you feel on a cold day, and then like that moment I wrote some poem at the bus stop. I'll always remember that moment much more than any other number of mornings that I stood at the bus stop and I didn't write a poem. So it just helps you form memories and have these little nuggets, for yourself personally, but then it can also, it's a great way for other people to become aware of all the stuff that's passing them by that they didn't notice, and maybe they'll stop and they'll notice more things too.
Yeah, that's you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what we all should try to do is just take the moments as they come, even the smile of a stranger. Sometimes that's an interesting thing. I like to walk around smiling. It's a good way to get other people to smile back at you.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of an infectious thing. And it's the small things in life. I can't go and I can't end a war. I can't fix inflation. I can't do any of that stuff. I can't right every wrong. What I can do, smile through it. There's other people there, other fellow human beings, and you're one of the good ones, Agnes.
Thanks, Mike.
And I'm going to put a link up to your HSA presentation because that was brilliant. It just knocked the cover off the ball. I wasn't the only one who felt the same way. So you've accomplished a great deal. I can't wait to see your book. If you get it together this year or next or the year after, or you're like me and you put it off until you're 90, uh, that that I can't wait to see it. So I thank you very much for being a part of the failed haiku interviews and taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and asking me questions.